Welcome to the Earthworks Podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joel Simmons, and this is the Earthworks Podcast, and I'm very excited to have Ryan Bjorn, who is, what is your title? Superintendent of Grounds?
Field Superintendent, yep.
Field Superintendent at the New England Patriots, who just wrapped up the season. We're recording this as the first rounds of playoffs are already in the books. And you're getting, what'd you tell me, 5 inches of snow, 6 inches of snow in the stadium right now?
Yeah, I'm watching the security footage on the monitor behind my laptop, and it's just it's dumping right now. They originally told us probably a couple inches, and by the time I came in here, it's 11 o'clock when we started recording. We had probably 4 inches on the ground, and it doesn't seem like it's slowing down. So one of those days where you expect one thing and adjust.
Yeah, we're sending it your way. We got hit pretty hard starting about 9 o'clock last night. I'm in New Jersey, and so it's heading your way, and we've got about 4 inches on the ground. So it's been a lot of fun. How much responsibility of snow do you guys have? Do you have to plow the parking lot? Is that you?
No, there are multiple contractors that do the bulk of the parking on the site here. We do have some responsibility. We take care of the area around the field house, which is adjacent to our practice field shop. We take care of the area around our practice field shop, obviously, and then kind of the road from our stadium field that goes up by the helipad in between the two fields and all the way up to our shop. So not a ton of responsibility, but enough to keep us busy on a day like today for sure.
How early did you guys have to get into?
This morning was a normal start for us, 7 a.m. It hadn't really started too heavy at that point, so we felt comfortable just doing a normal start. But for example, like the last game of the year we had against the Jets when it was snowing, we were here from 10 o'clock at night on Saturday all the way through the end of the game on Sunday.
Oh, really? So the crew came in. How big is the crew?
I've got myself and two assistant field superintendents, one that oversees the Patriots practice fields, one that oversees the Revolution practice fields, MLS team, and then we have 4 other full-time field crew members, as well as anywhere from 2 to 4 part-time guys, depending on what we have going on.
So they were all there for that snowstorm before the Jets game.
Yeah, we were all hands on deck all night because we were a little unsure of how it was all going to shake out. We wanted to make sure that we were here just in case. And I'm glad we were, because we ended up being busy during the game for sure.
Yeah, I saw some of that game, actually. It's kind of funny. Let me go backwards and talk about you and get a feel for how you got into all this thing. And you started to tell me some of this, which I didn't know. You actually wanted to be a landscape designer, I guess, right? You went to school. Where'd you go to school? I didn't even ask you that.
Sure, yeah. So when I'm from Maine originally. When I was in high school, I started working on golf courses with some buddies, and had these grand plans of becoming our own landscape design and have our own landscaping business. And then I went to school in Vermont initially, a small technical college, for landscape design and ornamental horticulture, but also to try and keep playing basketball, which was very secondary
priority in life
that I love. Yeah, and ended up getting an associate's degree in landscape design there. But while I was at Vermont Tech, I actually attended New England Grows, which is a big landscaping trade show here in Boston. And Dave Meller, the head groundskeeper at Fenway, was one of the keynote speakers. So I went to see that presentation. That's when I kind of found out about sports turf and looked at UMass, ended up transferring to UMass and got a degree in turf at UMass while I was there.
And then you ended up working for Dave for a while.
Correct. Yeah. So my first internship in 2007, while I was a turf student, was at Fenway with Dave, and it was a good year because that was their second World Series in 4 years. It was 2004 and then 2007. So I got in there just in time, and things steadily declined a little bit as my 4 years went on there. But it was a really great experience working with Dave, and there was a crew of us that went to school at UMass, and no spring breaks. I mean, every spring break I was working. It was like every weekend we'd go back and work. So it was a lot of hours, a lot of experience, but I learned a lot in my time at Fenway.
And after all those hours, you still wanted to stay in this industry and work in sports turf.
Yeah. I think baseball was probably not what I wanted to continue after those 4 years. It's 80 something games, and the season is so long, and I say that, and now the MLS season, we started training on grass yesterday, which would be January 15th, and
Yeah,
the
that's nuts.
championship is in December. So it's almost an 11-month season for soccer too. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
really fell in love with the industry, and got involved with the local STMA chapters while I was in college, and kind of started networking and seeing what could be done. Went to participated in the Turf Bowl at STMA at the time. So I got to
Right.
experience the national show, and really, really fell in love with it.
I still call it the STME, by the way. I'm not going to
Yeah,
change. I
I have a
refuse.
habit of that as
I
well.
refuse. It just rolls easier, and I don't like the whole, I don't like the whole change. Let me ask you this: when you saw Dave speak at New England Grows, did you approach him? Did you go up and talk to him at all? Did you try to network?
That's a great question. I don't know that I did. I don't specifically remember doing
Yeah,
that. I tend to be a pretty shy person, so my
yeah,
gut would say probably not. But I think it was just one of those eye-opening things that I didn't even realize sports turf was an area that I could get into at that time. I knew about the golf course side of it, obviously,
right.
from working there in high school, but I knew that wasn't golf. Golf superintendent wasn't something I had on my radar, just because the crazy schedule, and again, the
Yeah,
correlations now looking back is hilarious
yeah. You're
because our
you're in the
schedule is
thick of it
nuts.
now.
Yeah,
Yes.
but yeah. So once I found out about sports turf, I kind of never really looked back.
Yeah. It's funny because that's one of the things, spending some time teaching at Rutgers and other places, everybody says, well, it's all about who you know. And those are the kind of events, I love the fact that you saw him speak and it was, a big influence on you. A lot of folks would have gone up and just introduced themselves. And then look at, a couple of years later, you turn around and you start working for them. So,
Yep.
it is networking. I mean, it's really a good lesson to learn. So let's go back to your background. So you finish up your degree. Your first internship was at Fenway for how long were you there? Just for the season?
Well, ended up working all 4 years while I was in school. I did 3 full seasons, so to speak, and then I also did one my junior year at UMass. I did an internship with Rick Peruzzi up in the city of South Portland, Maine.
Oh, okay.
Most of my family had relocated to Kennebunk, which is also in southern Maine,
Yep.
and so it was close to home, and it was a different experience. City of South Portland, they have this facility called the Wainwright facility, and that was really my first um, exposure to high end parks and rec fields. Really,
Yeah.
is what it comes down to. And I didn't, growing up in Central Maine, our little league fields, our high school fields, it was all, it was typical parks and rec where the quality wasn't really great, but we didn't really know any different.
Yeah, you're a
And
kid.
Rick did such a great job in South Portland with creating such high quality fields. It really kind of opened my eyes, which helped, I think, a little bit as I got into the SoccerPlex as well.
Yeah. So you went from there down to Maryland?
So I finished my senior year. Went back to Fenway while I was at UMass, and then finished that year 2010 with the Red Sox. So I graduated UMass in spring of 2010. Finished year with the Red Sox in the fall of 2010, and actually jumped on with the crew here at Gillette with the previous superintendent John Bankson after the Red Sox season, and stayed on until the end of the Patriots season, which would have been around February 2011, and applied for a job in Maryland at the SoccerPlex for assistant, I think it was assistant field manager in training at the time.
Yeah.
And that was my first full-time job. Jared was the director of grounds, director of agronomy at the time down there. And so I packed up the car, drove to Maryland, and was down there for 8 years.
Jared's been on the podcast a couple of times. He's been a good friend of Earthworks, and we've always been very supportive, and he's been very supportive of us. And I love that complex. I mean, it's such an amazing place down there. It's huge.
Yeah.
I can only imagine you probably learned an awful lot on every one of these steps, but certainly down at the soccer complex because it's such a big complex.
Yeah, and as an intern and as a fresh out of college employee at a place like Fenway and Gillette, a lot of it is pretty basic stuff, right? You're kind of learning the building blocks and
Yeah.
how to do things, how to, once you screw up, learning those lessons and kind of taking that and moving on. But as your first full-time job at a place like the Soccerplex, which has 24 fields, 21 of those are natural grass. It was my first ever exposure to Bermuda grass. I was only used to cool season. So really we had native soil fields. We had a sand-based stadium field. We were doing drainage construction projects. it was just like drinking out of a fire hose almost,
Yeah,
as far as
I
all
can
the
imagine.
information that was coming in. But yeah, I've said it on other podcasts before, but the SoccerPlex and my time with Jared, I owe a lot of my career to that, because it was just so much to learn in such a short amount of time.
And you were in the mid-Atlantic, which is, I think, I've said this many times here on the podcast, I think it's the hardest place in the country to grow grass. I mean, considering a lot of it is cool season grasses. I mean, you had Bermuda fields down there, but man, how was, you must have gone through some pretty ugly summers compared to compared to Maine, certainly, and other parts of, where you've been working. That must have been quite an eye-opener being in that mid-Atlantic weather.
It really was, and I'd never been to Maryland before I moved down there,
Oh,
um,
really?
even to visit. So I had really no idea what to expect. But moving down, I thought, "Oh, this is gonna be great. No more winter. It's gonna be nice and warm." And I was very wrong, because
Yes,
it's
very
just
wrong.
the summers are hot, the winters are cold. It's very
Yeah,
it was eye opening for sure.
yeah.
And having both Bermuda grass and cool season, and being able to try and see those challenges that come with the Bermuda grass in the winter and the bluegrass in the summer. It forces you to kind of get out of your comfort zone and look for other alternative solutions for all those problems, because there isn't turn the turf textbook page to 15 and look at, okay, how do you deal with this
What's
problem?
this?
That
What's this going on? Yeah.
exactly. So it really it I think it helped with kind of problem solving a lot as well, and being able to think outside the box.
Yeah, I can't imagine that everything wasn't thrown at you when that many fields and that place is busier than I've probably ever seen any complex. I mean, that place is just a factory of moving people through there. So you're
Absolutely.
constantly fighting play and the kids coming in and out and trying to keep the fields alive. And Jared's always done a phenomenal job on those
Yep,
fields.
yep. It was like I said, that I had my first exposure to high quality, park and rec, or non-professional fields, for the most part, was in Maine, and then it really even was expanded on that at SoccerPlex, and they really pride themselves on having the highest quality fields, but
Yeah.
still being able to maintain that incredibly high use rate as well. So that was something that I didn't even know was possible, really, until I got down there, and again, just expanding and opening your eyes to what can be done and what's possible.
So what was this is probably a stupid question, but what was one of the better lessons learned from coming from there up to back into New England? I mean, what kind of things did you bring with you that you've been able to utilize from that
Yeah,
Mid-Atlantic?
that's a great question. To pick one would be really hard. I think,
I would
um,
think. Sorry, I set you up
yeah,
for that.
yeah, as a way of almost kind of copping out, it's just the overall
Yeah,
perspective and philosophy of just don't be afraid of a challenge. Don't
yeah.
don't always have no as your first answer.
Good,
Um,
good
because
recommendation.
Yeah, and it's really, and while I was in the Mid Atlantic, I was introduced to John Turnauer at the Nationals through
Oh,
Jared, and I remember specifically a conversation I was helped out with the postseason a couple times, and I can't remember if it was that or the All-Star game, but we were sitting and just around chatting, figuring out what was going on, and he was talking about all the events and everything that they had there, and I remember this conversation vividly. He said, don't go into a meeting anticipating saying no, because that's not what's expected from the front office or whoever is putting those
yeah.
events on, and you don't want to immediately start with that kind of negative attitude. You want to go into it saying, okay, how can we accomplish this, even though it's going to be difficult? And that is something where now, in our stadium and really on our practice fields as well. I mean, we're one of the busiest event stadiums in the country, if not the world, as far as concerts, games, different sports, everything that we have going on here. So unfortunately, I can't go into a meeting with someone coming up with a new idea for a new event and saying, no, we can't do that.
Right.
It's more like, okay, how can we figure out how to pull this off?
Yeah. I mean, that's not only a good business lesson, but that's a good life lesson if you think about
Mhm.
it. And a lot of people, and I'm sure you've worked with a lot of people or dealt with a lot of people that is their first reaction. And it's very frustrating. I mean, it's just, I mean, it's, especially if you're managing a big operation or a business or whatever it is. You don't want people to come into it saying, "No, we can't do that." We tell me how we can do it. And
Yeah.
it's the first gut reaction is typically to say, well, I don't think we can do that. But but you're right. I mean, that makes sense. So you left Maryland and you went right back up to Gillette.
Yeah, so I had stayed in touch with John Bankson, the previous superintendent here.
Hmm.
In my time down there, just became friends, and Dennis Brolin also, who owns Sports Turf Specialties, which is a huge sports field construction
Yep.
and maintenance company up here in New England. He was actually the superintendent at Gillette before John, so
Yeah.
that pipeline, stayed in touch with them a lot. John decided to step down and go on to something different from Gillette in July of 2019, and I got a call asking if I'd be interested in the position. I said, of course I would. The interesting kind of personal side of that is that phone call that I received asking if I'd be interested was 2 weeks after my wife and I had closed on our first home in
In
Maryland.
Maryland.
Yep. So that
Great.
timing was pretty difficult,
Oh
and at the
man,
time
that
we were
sucks.
engaged. So when we had a date to be married in September of 2019, so there was a lot of personal stuff that went into that decision as well. But and at the end of the day, it's one of these opportunities that was too good to
Yeah.
pass up, and coming back to New England and taking this position is something I'm eternally grateful to even have been considered for, and really happy to have been offered the position, and I will always be forever grateful to my wife as well, because she's
So
from Maryland.
she came with you is what you're
She
saying.
came, yeah.
All right. I was hoping we'd get to that because
Yes.
that
Yeah.
sounds like it could be a bad
Yeah.
Hallmark movie.
Yeah. She came with me, and we ended up I came up a month before, lived in a hotel for a month, just got my feet under me, flew back down. We packed a U-Haul, did the typical, like, pack the U-Haul, pack the dog, the wife, and we drove up together. And that was in early September of 2019, and then we got married 2 weeks later. So
Back
in May,
down in
which
Maryland,
worked
did you
out
go
well.
back down for the wedding or was it?
We ended up getting married in Maine, which that worked out well. It was closer to where we were living now. So
Yeah.
um, it was a hectic 6 months for sure,
Oh
but
man. Were you able
at
to
the end
sell
of
the
the day,
house?
huh?
Were you able to sell the house?
How we were. It stayed on the market for a while. So if you remember 2019 into 2020, obviously that's when COVID happened,
Yeah,
and
not good.
the market couldn't have been more dead at the time. But
Yeah.
we ended up selling in 2020, and that's in the past, a learning lesson, and now we know how the process works for sure.
So that you came back as the big cheese up here. So you came you
Correct.
you you came back in the position that you're in now.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of a hard job not to accept, right? You know.
Yeah, I mean, there's only 30, you know, head guys, head positions at NFL stadiums in the world, and when
Yeah.
you look at it like that, that opportunity doesn't come up very often. And here was even more unique, where I think a lot of times, if someone in this role leaves, it's either because they're retired, which is great, or because there might have been a failure, or they didn't get along with the coaching staff, or whatever that was. But here, John was incredibly good at what he did. He had a
Yeah.
great relationship with the whole staff. He was just ready for something different. So I came in, and there was a lot of walls up. It was, who's this guy? How's he going to be? And so that was a lot of what we did the first probably 6 to 12 months, was just kind of building trust and earning the trust of the coaching staffs, the players, the front office, everything. So
So how do you
uh,
do that? I mean, what's the trick? I mean, what advice would you give somebody in any kind of role? And that's got to be a problem for anything, especially in a high profile job like yours. I mean, how do you build that trust quickly?
yeah, it's a great question, and I think for myself and for our staff, all we've tried to do is just be as transparent as possible. And because we know that everything we're doing, and our passion is to make sure that the surfaces that the players and the coaches are using every day are as best as they possibly can be. So if we make any requests, or if we have to, whether it's a request for the team to either move around from a different area, or move from a field to a different field, or if it's a request to the front office for equipment, we want to make sure that they know that anything we're asking for generally is going to help the operation, and isn't just a nice to have. We want to make sure that everything we're doing is essential to our operation, to
Yeah.
make it better and more efficient.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And that just takes time and energy. When you came on board, I assume you had John's staff. You weren't able to bring anybody on of your own. So,
So nope, that's not how it worked. So
oh,
John
really?
Yeah. When John left,
He took everybody with him
well,
and left you high and
yes
dry.
and no.
I'm
I
just
think
kidding,
the
John. I hope you're
guys,
not listening.
right? Yeah, it was not a malicious thing by any stretch of
I
the
know, I
imagination.
know, I know.
When he left, the majority of the staff also left, so it was a challenge, but we just tried to see it as an opportunity to kind of build a new team and create our own culture at that point. When I had started, they had hired an assistant superintendent already, Elliot Lindstrom, who was I don't know if he'll listen to this or not, but he was a lifesaver for us. I mean, I said drinking out of a fire hose earlier. That was the ultimate. I mean, we were talking
Yeah.
right in the middle of training camp. Everything was going on at the stadium, and he was able to kind of internalize everything, take everything for what it was, communicate with me even down in Maryland before I started, and I think we got off to a great start. So he stayed on as our assistant superintendent that oversaw the Revs facility because that was being built at the time.
Yeah.
He's since moved on. He's now the head groundskeeper for the AAA affiliate for the Red Sox in Worcester, the
Yeah.
Woo Sox. So he was a great asset for us, and having him was crucial. The only other staff that stayed on was Tyler Vandenacker, who he had just finished 2019. He was hired on the team as a full-time turf crew. He moved from California. He's from Mass, and he was working in California. And a year after I started, he had shown how good he was. His attitude was incredible. So he was promoted to our other assistant that oversaw the Patriots side of things, and he has since moved back to California with his wife and is now assistant field manager for the Chargers out there.
Yeah, I'd heard
So
that. Yeah,
we
that's
had
a great
I was
story.
very, very lucky to have a great staff that kind of helped me get through that process, and we built that team up internally.
I didn't know any of this. So you got there in the middle of training camp with no staff. So
Essentially, yeah,
You had Elliot basically, but you had to build a whole team. Well, I mean, I know your team's not huge, but it's still a team, and it's
right.
imperative as you're going into the beginning of the season. So you were a month away from first game.
Yeah,
Wow.
so the week that I started was our first preseason game.
Oh,
And
great timing.
yeah,
Hey,
and it was
welcome on board. Oh, by the way, we're in the heat of it all
exactly.
now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully you know how to
So
do this.
yeah, and we said so it was myself, Elliot, Tyler. The mechanic was there for another 2 weeks or so after I
Oh,
started.
great.
And yeah, and so had a lot of temp labor that was familiar with the site because they had worked a lot with John previously, so that helped us, and then we were able to hire in the rest of our full-time staff over the next couple of years.
How are you able to find time to hire people in the middle? You came in preseason and you're hiring people. I mean, how do you even find
Yeah,
time to do that?
we did a lot. We did a lot of quote unquote limping through
Yeah,
that first season.
I'm sure it's worse than limping, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and we had some great part-time staff as well that was around. I had reached out to some of my friends that were in the industry, and they helped out with some part-time staff. And we actually one of the part-timers that we had on staff at the time, who was an assistant superintendent at TPC Boston, he had been hired previously before I got there. And he's actually now our assistant superintendent in charge of the Revs facility.
Oh,
So
great.
we had him, kind of on our staff already, and again, we've with the turnover that we've had and the transitions that we've had, he's now on our staff as an assistant, and we pulled him out of the golf industry. We stole him, so
Yeah. I'm just sweating here just listening to this story. I can't
it
even
was
imagine what you were
it
going
was
through.
busy.
Yeah, I can imagine. Let's talk about all the stuff that you're responsible. You're talking about Revolution Soccer. I mean, I think a lot of people listening might not even realize that that's part of your job responsibility. So talk a little bit about that. Where are they? What's the responsibility that you're dealing with? And obviously you're dealing with practice facilities and then of course the stadium as well. So
Right.
You got a lot of things on your docket, and you didn't want to be in golf because it was too hard. I
Yeah.
don't think I understand that.
Yeah. But it's funny. I didn't want to be in golf, so then I went to a 24 field facility in Maryland
Right,
where,
exactly.
we had
I think
700
you're thinking a
acres.
little backwards, buddy.
Right. So I went from, when I took the job in my head, I thought, 24 fields to 6 fields. That's not too bad. I can manage that.
Yeah, sure.
But then, the added pressure of the stadium field and, I'll give you the quick rundown is we
Yeah.
have the stadium, Gillette Stadium, obviously. Everything's in Foxborough, Mass. We're 35 minutes, give or take, based on traffic outside of Boston. The stadium is a home to the New England Patriots, New England Revolution, NFL and MLS respectively, as well as events, concerts, everything, you
Yeah.
name it, graduations. So we stay very busy in the stadium. On site, we have right out essentially behind the stadium, we have the New England Patriots practice field. So we have 3 natural grass fields that we maintain for the football team. And in 2019, when I got here, they were finishing completion of the Revolution Training Center, which is the MLS training fields that they have out back. So all still on site. So our practice field shop is essentially kind of splits in between the football fields and the soccer fields. And we've got 3 natural grass fields that we maintain for the soccer team as well. So the first team, the Revolution first team, has 2 fields. It's one big 5-acre surface that's attached to the training center. And then the second team, academy, youth development program, they all use a third field, which is separate, one natural grass field that they have. And we just started construction of a new synthetic turf practice field for the younger age groups, the youth programs and stuff. So eventually we'll have 1 synthetic soccer field outdoor, 3 natural grass fields for soccer outdoor, 3 natural grass fields for football outdoor, the stadium field synthetic, and an indoor facility that's multi-use. We have soccer uses it, football uses it very rarely, and then we have trade shows, tailgate parties, everything else inside as well.
In that bubble there, that's right
Correct.
next
Yep.
to the stadium. So
Yep.
what's the difference from your standpoint between the football practice fields and the soccer practice fields? Are they managed differently? Are they? I mean, I can't imagine you don't have a ton of people on those soccer fields during the season.
Yeah, the first team fields tend to stay pretty much dedicated to just the first team. We'll have some extra stuff for we hosted the German national soccer team for a week last year when they
Yeah.
were playing in Connecticut. But for the most part, they have those. The original question, do we manage them the same or differently? We manage them, a lot of what we do is very similar, but we do manage them differently at a very granular basis. So when it comes to cultural practices and everything else, our timings are very different. Soccer is out there. Like I said, we had our first practice for the soccer team on a grass field yesterday.
That's
Um,
unbelievable. And
right.
you're
And
getting
so,
snow today.
yeah. And, that saying that, it's important to note that we have a hydronic heating system in one of the
Right.
2
That
fields
was
for the
my
first
next
team
question. Yeah.
that allows us to be able to do that, which is great. And then agronomically, we manage, our base program is pretty much the same for all 6 fields for the
Yeah.
most part, because at the end of the day, our goal is to grow the best Kentucky bluegrass that we can here. Soccer stays we try and keep it as close to 100% KBG as we can. And then football, we end up throwing a lot of rye during the season just to keep new plants germinating all the time.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
so we'll tailor some stuff. Our PGR usage is a little different, and our actual products are a little different based on the facility. But overall, our base program stays pretty much the same, and then a lot of the sprayables might change depending on what we have going on each facility.
Just trying to keep everything pushed and going.
Exactly.
Is it all
Yep.
sand based?
All sand based. The soccer fields that were built in 2019 are built incredibly well. Great drainage system. Everything's piped for sub air to be able to have a vac and ventilation system if we're
Good.
able to get the unit in there. And one of them has a hydronic system, so that's great. The academy, quote unquote, academy grass field for soccer that we have, that was built back in 2014, 2015 with a flat tile drain system on sand that works a little bit. It works okay. It's not like a full drainage setup
Right.
that we have down there, but we've been able to improve that with some surface aeration, linear drainage, things like that. The football fields are a little different. Same thing with football is we have one 5-acre surface that has 2 football fields on it. That was built when the stadium was being built. Those were built as quote unquote temporary practice fields at the time in 2001, 2002, and have since not had any major renovations. So they are sand based, but Denny Brolin will tell you
Yeah.
when they graded those fields, they did that by pulling a telephone pole across them because it was just trying to get them
That's the technology used.
exactly. Yeah.
Brilliant.
So we
Wow.
have one separate football practice field that used to be the Revolution training field. And 2 years ago now, so 2022, we did a mini renovation down there where
Yeah.
it was originally built as a 10-inch profile. And by the time we got to it in 2022, it was 18 inches.
Oh
Um,
boy.
8 inches of just layering over the years, and it's no fault of anyone's. It was just that field got used from March through October for Revolution, and then as soon as the Revolution were done, the Patriots would go down there and they'd be out there till January or February. So the time to the you would normally do your core aerations or your heavy cultural practices, it just disappeared. So it just top dress sand, top dress sand, top dress sand, and it just built up over time, trying to keep it alive.
Yeah. What give me some ideas as to your basic agronomic philosophies. How are you managing this from a fertility standpoint? I mean, what's the concept? Not necessarily the products, but the concepts.
Yep, yep. So we do a lot. We essentially start our ultimate goal for the most part is going to be we want about a tenth of a pound of nitrogen released from our granular program, and we'll supplement that with anything foliar that we need to. But what we've found so far with our soil testing and just historical kind of paying attention to what's going on with the soil profile is the football fields, the two upper fields, as they were built temporarily with terrible drainage,
Right.
but that soil profile agronomically, it's like bulletproof.
Oh,
We
good.
are super comfortable with how well it handles the nitrogen that we put out. The release is very consistent, not really temperature dependent as much as we would expect. And then when we built the soccer fields in 2019, we were starting with essentially fresh sand. So we
Yeah.
had to really build that base up over the last few years with a lot of organic products, just trying to catch that field up a little bit
Yeah.
compared to the other. So that created some differences with the two profiles. The other big difference is the heating system now, we're essentially growing 12 months a year. And so we've
Right.
learned some lessons. Last year was our first full season having that hydronic system, and we pulled the covers in January and we were mowing in snow and we were like, this is the greatest thing ever. And,
Right.
March rolled around and it just nosedove,
Why?
because, well, we didn't, the fall before, we hadn't done any late fall fertilization. We had
Mm.
no
No dormant
actual
feed.
food in the ground. And
Yeah.
so it just burned through all its reserves in the blink of an eye when we had the soil temps at, 60, 65 degrees in
Yeah.
January and February. So
Oh,
we
because you
tried to
were warming up early, you were taking it all out. Yeah.
exactly. So by
That's
the
a good
time it was
lesson.
normally
Yeah.
waking up, it was really tailing off. And so, we don't know for sure this year. We won't know until we get to March and April, but we did some late fall fertilizing. We actually used some 5-4-5 out there to make sure that we had a good base for when it starts to wake up. So that way it's not burning through all its reserves.
Yeah. Yeah. Keeping
We'll hopefully
biology
have,
going is a good thing, isn't it?
yeah,
Especially during
yeah.
the winter.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time I never thought in a million years that I'd be spraying PGR on bluegrass in December in
Right.
Foxborough. But
Exactly.
yeah, we've been keeping the field under regulation essentially 12 months a year because we don't want it getting super leggy and growing vertically under the tarps
Yeah, of
or the
course not.
evergreens when we have the heating system going. So,
Are you cutting both the
but
sides, the soccer, football at the same height?
yep, yep. Everything's
Yeah.
maintained at 3/4 of an inch pretty much all year. We did take the soccer field, the heated field, up to an inch when the team wrapped up their training for the year this past fall. And as
Just so you
they,
can grow some roots?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep, trying to build those reserves as much as possible and kind of almost let the plant relax a little bit because
Yeah.
we just, we grind and grind and grind and it takes a beating. So wanted to let it kind of relax and eat and photosynthesize as much as possible. And then, we knew that they were coming back yesterday, so we went back 2 weeks off of that, started our maintenance program, took it back down to 3/4, sprayed it with, snow mold app, PGR, and some
Right.
spray fertilizer, and here we are.
So what did it look like when you took the tarps off the other day?
We were really happy with it. I mean, it was
Good.
we cut a pretty good amount of grass this past Thursday, and then we covered it back up Friday. Had it covered all weekend to kind of protect it from the cold temps. Pulled it yesterday morning, and I
And you
mean, it
got
looks
snow
like,
today. You got snow on it now.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it's got
great.
snow on. So
So now what
it'll
happens?
melt off, it'll melt off probably by tomorrow, and we're trying to get covers back out because our nighttime temps the next 5 to 6 days are probably averaging the mid-teens.
Yeah.
So we want to try and protect that. That the leaf tissue is super super juicy, and we don't
Yeah.
want it. There's a lot of moisture in there. We don't want it just completely frosting and freezing. So try and protect it from the wind desiccation, and that way when they come back next week, we can pull the covers and they can play again.
Wow, there's a lot to think about here, isn't there? You got a lot of things on you in the air that you're ball dancing. It's funny. We were talking, about before we got started. We were talking about Travis Hogan at the Chiefs, a friend of ours, and who's been on the podcast and
Mhm.
was a student of mine at Rutgers. But man, he did a phenomenal job. I watched that game and with a couple bourbons in hand, but I just couldn't. I didn't even watch the game. I was just so in awe with the work that they were able to when they came out on the on television, they were showing the field and they were just talking how hard it was, and then they started talking. The announcer started talking about the heating system, and by game time, man, it was beautiful. And
Yeah,
just to maintain that on the pressure that you guys must be under. I mean, and I texted Travis and congratulated him, but the pressure that you must be under for that 4-hour stretch of your week. I mean,
yeah,
it all builds. What's it like to have to be? Of course, you're on a plastic field on the stadium, but still, you still have to have all the main things working. I mean, it's got to be a tremendous amount of pressure. How do you describe that to somebody when they ask you that question? What's it like during that 2 days of game day?
yeah. I mean, that's a great question. I don't know that anyone's ever asked me to describe that. I think it's organized chaos is probably
Yeah,
the
it's
best way
got to
to
be that.
describe it.
Yeah.
And going back to Trav, I think you said you had a couple bourbons in your hand during the game. He probably would have killed to have a bourbon in his hand
Oh,
during
I'm
that,
sure he would have, knowing
staying
him.
warm. And those guys did an incredible job. I mean,
Incredible,
the
incredible.
announcers do what they always do and find something to harp on.
Exactly.
That field played incredibly well. The footing was great.
It was
And
minus
going
four
back,
degrees for God's sake.
yeah,
Everything
it
was
was.
hard as a rock,
Yeah, and
except for
we
that
talk
field.
about we're talking about the heating system, and one of the things, generally you would think, okay, it's going to be cold, let's crank the heat, but then you're going to talk about dew formation, and when
Yeah.
it's that cold, you pull that tarp, instantly it's going to frost, and then it's going to look like it's frozen, and you're going to have other issues. So there's a lot to consider when you're
It's a
talking about that
science.
stuff, and even for us with the plastic field. Our last game with the Jets, we had the snow game, and we had to make a decision. Do we want to tarp? Do we not want to tarp? And our decision at the end of the day was not to tarp. We have a heating system under the artificial field here as
Yeah.
well. And we knew that due to the timing of the storm, it wasn't going to start till 11, 12 o'clock at night. And, the game, we essentially as NFL field managers have to quote unquote hand the field over 4 hours before kick. So that essentially only gave us 8 hours that it would be snowing. So we said, no tarp. We'll plow it if we have to. We had the heating system cranked. We ended up starting to plow the field at maybe 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. We pushed off maybe an inch and a half, 2 inches of slush. We dragged the field with a brush. We matted the field with our artificial mat that we used to help settle the infill.
Yeah.
And before the game started, it was like it hadn't even snowed. Um, that being said, once it dropped 10 degrees and the snow picked up, then it started to accumulate, and we were out there running around like madmen with backpack blowers trying to keep lines clear. And that's the organized chaos that I reference,
Yeah.
where we have a plan, we have set parameters where we can and can't go to clear lines, when we can and can't go to clear lines. But a lot of that too is it's not fluid, but I did a lot of communication with the refs, the side judges, just to make sure that if there was something that they needed, and if they ask us to do something, it doesn't matter, we do it. But if we have the ability to go out any TV timeout, any break and play, we can't clear anything in front of the play, and we can't clear anything for a kicker that would be advantageous to one side, not the other. But we can
Oh,
clear
okay.
everything behind the play. So it was just we had 9 guys. We had 11, 12 backpack blowers, so we had a couple on reserve, and it was just once it started to stick, it was probably every single TV timeout we were doing yard lines, hashes, sideline hashes, goal lines, just trying to get something cleared off because it was accumulating pretty quickly.
So all of that was done with blowers, not brushes or brooms. I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
realize
We
that.
were lucky where the snow was light enough that it made more sense to try and do that rather than trying to run with a shovel, and you can catch an edge or do something there. So
Yeah. Yeah.
ideally, blowers are better for us because that way we don't have to worry about damage or somebody tripping and falling as much. But it worked. It was a nice light snow and cleared the
I was gonna
lines
say,
up.
what if it's a heavy snow? What do you do then? What if it's a wet, heavy snow?
Yeah, then you have to consider probably pushing with shovels and just
Yeah.
being really careful, which we had to do that for MLS 2 years ago. We had our first game in February. It was the CONCACAF Champions League game, and it
Mm.
snowed the whole game, and that was what we had to do. We had half our staff on one end of the field, half on the other end of the field, and when play would go to the far end, we'd clear the 6-yard box line and clear the 18-yard box line. And same thing, just trying to push snow and hopefully you don't catch an edge and go ass over tea kettle, so to speak.
Right. You were on the field as they were playing on the other end.
Yeah.
You'd be on the back end while they were up there. Wow.
Yeah.
If there's a fast break, you just have to run and get the hell out of there real fast.
Yeah, you got to be really careful, and a lot like you'd wait for a corner kick on the far end because then there's some downtime. But we would a 6-yard box. We can clear that 6-yard box in 15 seconds probably with two guys.
Yeah.
So we know that if they're on the very far end of the field, we felt comfortable we could get on and get off.
Right.
Yeah.
When during the football game, who do you take direction from during? You said you have to hand it over to the NFL at 4 hours prior. Who are you handing it over to, and who are you taking direction from at that point?
Yeah, so we don't. I mean, it's a hypothetical handoff.
Right.
That's
I
our
understand that.
deadline to make sure that the field's playable. The NFL has an on-site game day rep that goes to every one person at every home game across the board on every weekend. So we have a dedicated person that's our essential liaison if we have any questions for the league or anything like that, and then them in combination with the referees during the game. Pre-game and everything, it's really the NFL rep, but during the game, it's just direct contact with the refs.
I got you. That makes sense. You must have grown up as a Patriots fan, I'm guessing, from being from Maine.
Oh man, I'm trying to think of how to answer this politically.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
That's okay. Anyone that knows me knows that I was actually raised a Steelers fan, which growing up in New England, being a Steelers fan was not particularly enjoyable.
How did that happen?
So I grew up single parent. My mom was a diehard Patriots fan, and when I'm a pain in the ass teenager, the last
You
thing
just
I
wanted
wanted
to be different.
exactly. So my uncle was a diehard Steelers fan and kind of saw an opportunity, pulled me under his wing, and I was always a Steelers fan. So now it's when they're not playing each other, it's easy, and when they're playing each other, I have to support the Patriots.
So you're a little sad this morning, then, I assume.
Yeah, it was
the day after a Steelers loss.
It's been a tough year all around.
I grew up in Pittsburgh, and my father was in television, and he actually worked the Steelers game. This is back in the 60s and somebody had to stand on the sideline telling them when they could take a break. It wasn't like today when, there was TV timeouts. There were no TV timeouts then.
Okay.
So, he had to be the guy that said, yeah, now, go now. Cause somebody's down or, they're changing or something. And every once in a while you'd miss and there was no recourse, they'd miss the play because this guy, what the hell are you saying? Go now. But yeah, grew up as a Steelers fan myself, but fair weather fan across the board.
Rough.
And a Pirates fan as well, but that goes good. Let's talk a little bit about when I've been going to Gillette Stadium now, and I saw you a couple months ago. I've probably been going almost 20 years doing the Tom Irwin, our business partner up there, who you work with, have been doing their agronomy meetings at the stadium, which is always one of the highlights of the year for me. I mean, it's funny because I walk in now, and even the guards know who we are, and they say hi, and it's just such a great facility. But I remember, when we first started doing this, you were grass, and I remember we were doing a meeting one time, and I don't know if it was John or who it might have been, but they were actually applying Ecolite to the field, and I'm up there giving a talk about earthworks and things of that nature. When did you guys move away from grass at the stadium?
So that was in 2006.
Okay, so that tells you how old I'm getting, but yeah, I mean, and so let's talk about this. Right now, there are 17 plastic fields. I'm going to call them plastic fields out of disrespect.
That's what they
apologize. And then there's 13 grass fields, and I guess I don't know who they are, but there's 2 stadiums that they're calling hybrids now, and I'm not sure. Is Philly one of those? I don't.
Well, Philly definitely used to have the
they
hybrid
used to have a system, but they're not.
I don't believe they do anymore. But
no, I think he pulled it out. I know Tony.
Green Bay is definitely a hybrid.
Green Bay is a hybrid. Yeah.
Yeah.
and I don't know who the other one is, but so you're going back to grass for soccer, but you told me that there's at least a consideration on going back to grass in the stadium for football,
I think
maybe.
that there's a decision that needs to be made, because
Yeah,
we will be grass, full natural grass, full profile, everything for World Cup in 2026, and that transition back from World Cup to football, that's a decision that's going to need to be made, whether we stay grass or switch back to synthetic immediately, and that's not one, as far as I know, that's not one that's been made yet.
yeah.
And we'll see what happens when they make that decision.
What you guys? I mean, I know you guys all talk to each other, but there's got to be a lot of scuttlebutt, and a lot of the press is, the players are now kind of starting to get loud about wanting to have grass, just for safety. I mean, just think about all the ACLs and all the knee injuries, shoulder injury. I mean, everything that's going on. A lot of it, is being blamed on artificial turf, and I mean, I'm obviously a big advocate. I know Jared Minnick have been very loud about keeping natural grass, and it just makes perfect sense. And the thing is about natural grass now. I mean, look at what Travis Hogan did at Kansas City. We can grow natural grass anywhere now with the technologies that we have. So
Mhm.
why would they not entertain that? And I know this is a big question, and it's probably beyond your pay grade, but what's the scuttlebutt among you guys and natural grass in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the biggest question in our industry.
Yeah,
It's something that has become almost divisive in our industry,
I
which
bet.
is
I bet.
unfortunate. I think it's just you have to look at every situation independently, right?
Yeah.
And for us here, we are a stadium that hosts, 18 MLS games a year, hopefully upwards of 10 NFL games a year, with playoffs, ideally.
Yeah,
Uh,
let's hope.
and we had 13 concerts last year. We had graduation, we had monster trucks, we had lacrosse. Uh,
Monster trucks.
Yep, and we had two separate event weekends last year where we had a concert on a Thursday and an MLS game on a Saturday, and
Oh
so
God.
I 100% agree with you because I at my core I'm a natural grass guy too. I mean, I
Yeah.
worked for Jared for 5 years. Like you
Yeah, he
can't
brainwashed you.
Jared for that long and not
Yeah.
have a passion for natural grass. And that's where I spend the majority of my time is on the natural grass on the practice fields
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Um, but I think, if you look back to the season that we've had and the situation that we have here, it's the technology to grow natural grass in any environment is available to us today. And
Yeah.
it will only get better as we get the research in from the World Cup because we're going to have to grow extremely high quality turf indoors for 16 weeks in some of these stadiums for World Cup. The problem becomes event scheduling, event
Yeah.
usage,
Well, that
event
makes
load
sense. Yeah.
because here specifically it's you look back on those 2 weekends where we had a concert Thursday and a game Saturday, the likelihood of being able to pull that off on a natural grass field is almost zero.
Yeah.
And yep, we have technology, we have the machines, we have the equipment, we have everything that we need. But when we get access to the field after a concert on Thursday night, we get the field cleared at the absolute earliest, 5 or 6 a.m. on Saturday. That's just not enough time to get a field in there from 5 a.m. Saturday to a 7:30 kick on a Saturday night.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now, is that saying you can't work around and change scheduling and work that way? I'm not going to say that because that, like you said, that's above my pay grade. But just the way things are scheduled makes it extremely difficult. And, I think like I saw a couple during the game, during Trav's game, a couple people would reposted the tweet about a heating system, and there's just no excuse for not having natural grass. And I agree with the sentiment, but it just until you know what each individual stadium is dealing with from an event standpoint, it's just not a fair statement.
That may be the best answer to that question I've ever heard. And it goes back to really, I mean, at the end of the day, what you guys do is a business,
Hmm.
and it's got to be run as a business. And if you can't effectively, be successful in that environment, then yeah, that makes perfect sense. But like you said, maybe it is about scheduling. But
There's a
it's
lot,
gonna.
and
I
there's there's just a lot that goes into it, right?
Right.
It'd be so nice if it was like a black and white, it could be done, it can't be done, but there's just so much more. It makes it a much more muddied argument. And the other thing, well, I might take some flack on this too, but a lot of you see a lot of the stuff about injuries on Twitter, right? You go on Twitter, every time someone gets hurt on a synthetic field, there's
It's the
outrage.
grass. Yeah, right.
NFLPA, players, whatever, it's outrage. But then
Yeah.
someone will have a non-contact ACL injury on a grass field, and then no one says a word because
Yeah.
it just doesn't. I agree that as long as we're paying attention to the science and the data, and it shows one versus the other, you can't argue that, in my
Yeah.
opinion. But it's an unfair medium to be able to have that that outrage on social media and everything when one thing happens, but then you don't say anything when something else happens.
Well, I think we can all agree most of the outrage on social media is absurd anyway, and
That's
and
fair.
nonsensical and
Yep.
such. But hopefully, like I said, your description of this is really well stated. And again, at the end of the day, it's a business, so it's got to be what it is, and every business has the right to run, the way they have to run. But I mean, I know talking to people like Tony Leonard and Travis that going back and forth from the Rolling Stones and Taylor Swift to a
Oh, yeah.
football game is a nightmare.
It's
I mean,
not it's not easy, but
yeah,
those are the guys, like, to their credit, and I'd probably tell them too much. Like, I respect so much what they do because they're the ones that are showing how possible these things are
yeah,
in the right circumstances.
yeah,
So without those guys, we wouldn't have an argument at all moving forward. So we're super appreciative for how hard those guys work, and everybody. I mean, the 49, like all the natural grass
yeah,
fields
yeah,
that have football also generally have events. It's just,
yeah,
how many events, what the scheduling looks like, and
yeah.
everything else that goes into it.
Yeah, and that's a lot of work and a lot of effort. And usually they're sitting there with a field ready to roll in the background, and they come in and literally roll it in the next day and get going.
Hmm.
Let me ask you this: you just wrapped up a long season. What's that feel like? That I mean, obviously it wasn't your greatest. You've been probably with the best football team in the history of football, and certainly the best quarterback in the history of football. And now things have changed a little bit. But what's the end of the season like? I mean, the last days after the playoff games or the last game of the season, what's that feel like for you guys? I mean, is it a a big fresh a breath of fresh air, or are you just right back into it now? You got soccer, and I mean, is there any downtime? Is there any sitting around celebrating at all?
That's probably the question I get asked the most, especially this time of year, is like, so it's got to be so good to be in the off season,
Yeah,
or now
right.
that the season's done. And it is. There's definitely, especially once football ends, because there's so much that goes into the football season. Once that ends, stress levels drop because just you don't have that added pressure constantly. So overall, there is like a little bit of a sigh of relief. Okay, we can kind of catch our breath a little bit and start taking care of some off-season projects. But specifically this year, the football team lost on Sunday, and we started tearing the stadium field out for our field renovation on Monday. And
So there's
then
no downtime for you at all.
right, and then the soccer team reported to camp on that Friday and started training a week after the football season ended. So in theory, there's not much of a quote unquote off season anymore.
Yeah.
But we've just had to get creative on how we approach that from a staffing standpoint, and we want to make sure that guys are taking time off, and we're
Yeah.
only at the end of the day, it's a lot more work maintaining one natural grass field in December and January in Foxborough and keeping that going, but it's still just one field, so that helps as compared to July when we've got six natural grass fields, training camp, concerts,
Stadium,
everything else
concerts, yeah,
going on.
everything else going.
Yeah.
Let me wrap up by asking you this. I mean, you started this by saying you kind of got into golf and then you wanted to get into sports surf. What kind of advice would you give a young guy coming up the ranks, that might be in turf, be it, and feel free to go either direction. I mean, golf, sports turf. I mean, you kind of laid out, your theory is that golf was too busy, but I just heard an incredible time schedule for you. Do you even have time to see your wife at all anymore? It's
I think
what
if you ask her that and you ask me that, we might get different answers.
I
But
bet that's true of anybody in this industry, my friend.
yeah, and
What
she
kind of advice would you give to a young guy coming up?
Yeah, I think I've said this before, and so Weston Applefeller, who I worked with at Fenway initially, who was most recently at Austin FC and is now working for Pioneer, his advice when I asked him that exact question, because I had a lot of respect for him when I left Fenway, and when I was thinking about going to Maryland, I said, like, what advice do you have as far as someone who's potentially making a big leap like this? And he's like, now's the time to go. So my advice would be very similar. Like if you're a young turf manager and you're either fresh out of college or you're looking for internships while you're in school, my advice is to get away from your comfort zone, whether that's location or type of grass, or if you're comfortable in golf, try sports fields for a year, because you want to make sure that you experience as much as you possibly can to know what you truly love. And I was lucky enough to experience golf, baseball, soccer, lacrosse. I kind of checked a lot of those
Parks and
boxes.
Rec, you got everything in your resume, dude. I mean,
Right.
you got
And
everything.
even at SoccerPlex, I mean, we had Parks and Rec, college,
Yeah.
professional women's soccer. So that's probably my biggest thing, is try as many things as you can that are available to you, and that way you can find what you truly love. Because I'm lucky enough to have a job that I really do love and I'm passionate about. And if I wasn't, I don't think that I'd be able to make it through these crazy event seasons. You have to really love what you do to kind of be able to get through it.
Yeah, that's great advice. And just look at your resume, and I guess the best advice, just call Jared and get a job down there, and go work in Maryland and
Right.
pull a million different facilities and all that kind of stuff. All right,
Yeah.
last question. Who's your new coach going to be? Do we know this yet?
Yeah,
Put you on the spot.
they didn't. I'm not breaking any news, which is nice.
Oh, good.
That would be a problem, but it looks like it's going to be Gerard Mayo, who was on our coaching staff previously. He played his entire football career here. He's coached his entire career
Oh,
here, and
excellent. I didn't know that. That's great.
yeah, so he's scheduled for, I think, a press conference tomorrow at noon. So last week was a little crazy with announcements, press conferences, and everything, and so now that it'll be nice now to know who we're working with, and now we can start moving forward.
So do we know where Bill's going to end up?
That I don't know. I know he
No, I'm
interviewed
sure you
Anna
don't.
yesterday because of the social media, but that's a great question. If you
A lot
could,
of
if you could
rumors.
pick that, you'd be in pretty good
A
shape.
lot of rumors going around. I know
Yeah.
the folks in Dallas are begging, but who knows? Who
I
knows
think
what the
everybody
news?
would love to have him. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, look at what you guys have done. I mean, it's clearly, hands down the greatest run of sports history, really, if you think about
It's
it. You've
funny.
been
I
there for
was
most of it.
I was talking to my wife and some friends about this. I think I'm going to put on my business card, I'm the GOAT of running goats out of town, because 2019 was Brady's last year, and then
Yeah.
now Belichick's gone. So I'm really good at getting extremely
Oh.
talented people out of the building, I
So
guess.
this is all your fault, is what you're trying to
Yeah.
say. I
Yeah.
like it. I think that's a great
Um,
place to end.
yeah.
Ryan, I can't thank you enough for all your support over the years. I love going up to the stadium. I love seeing what you guys are doing, and I'm so grateful that you were able to give me an hour here and chat with us on the Earthworks podcast. And I wish you the best of. I still can't get over the fact that you got soccer already going.
Yep.
That just blows my mind that you're doing this
Well,
right now. So
I appreciate you having me on. We love Earthworks. We love the products. We love having you up here, and it's an honor to be on. So it's great chatting with you.
thank you so much. I appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed to the Earthworks podcast, please do. We try to bring some of the best and some of the goat killers onto our podcast as much as we
Oh,
can. And
I'm
we'll
gonna
be back.
regret that. I can tell.
Yes, I know you are.
Yeah.
I'll try to soft pedal it. But thank you so much. And
Of
we'll
course.
see everybody next week.